is a place for the self-transformation of the devotee, a place where the noise and confusion of the material world are left behind, where in the sanctified silence one may gain the knowledge of the oneness of all of creation. The earliest surviving temple is at Sanchi, next to ancient Vidisha in Madhya Pradesh. It is of the 5th century. The Vishnu temple at Deoghar, also in central India, is of the early 6th century. The temple and the sculpture upon it represent the cosmos and its eternal harmony. This is the theme which underlies early Indic religious traditions. The temple is conceived as the cosmos in miniature. The Brihat Samhita, written in the early 6th century, describes the center of the sanctum as the place for Brahman, the formless divine which pervades all that there is. Around the shrine are made manifestations of the deity in forms most closely associated with it. The sanctum sanctorum is called the Garbhagriha, or womb chamber. The womb contains the seed from which life is created. Therefore, the most sacred is found here. This is where the devotee transforms himself through the act of looking upon the image of the divinity. All that is within, and the moment of realization of the truth is that of transformation. The sight of the divine lifts the spirit to create peace and joy, taking us on the path towards realization. This transfer of grace, by looking upon the deity, is known as darshan and is common to Indic religions. The temple is a place where the cosmos is replicated and explained to the devotee. From the representation of the unmanifest eternal to the multitude of forms of the world. As time progressed, the temple became more grand and complex in its depiction of this theme. The abundance of life and the depiction of innumerable creatures of the world thickly covered the walls of the temple.
Well, the idea of the temple, the sanctum itself, is called the Garbhagriha, the womb room or the womb chamber. And the deity, in a sense, is being manifested, being born in that room, but not ending there. He, she, it, the deity, is starting in that room, yet encompassing the entire cosmos. And as with the very early altar in India, there is a sense of growth from that center that the developed temple building expresses extremely clearly in its walls and in its images.
A tower was made over the sanctum of the deity. As the number of people who visited the temple grew in size, and as provisions needed to be made for gatherings on festive occasions, a hall or mandapa was constructed before the sanctum. Both the tower and the hall developed different shapes in North and South India. In North India, a curvilinear tower in the style named Nagara was developed.
Well, the temple says many things, but the primary aim of a temple is to house the god within the sanctum and to express through the building's floor plan, ground plan, and wall structure, and tower as well, that the god is expanding into every direction of the world, not only the four cardinal directions, but infinitely upward and infinitely downward. And through that, the stepped wall of the temple expresses this idea, coming out from the center and relating in all of its measurements to the measurements of the sanctum space within. And it also is reflected in the images that come through, beginning in about the 8th century, 9th century, and really culminating with the full panoply of images by the 10th century, to be expressed on the images around the wall, especially evident in the North Indian temple form.
After the period of the Gupta Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries, the next great king of North India was Harsha, who ruled from the beginning till the middle of the 7th century. His capital was in north-central India at Kannauj, and under him was created an atmosphere of great culture and learning. After Harsha's death in the year 647, North and Central India were governed by various Rajput chiefs. Numerous temples were made in this period by the kings. They supported the learned Brahmin community and built shrines. This continued the tradition of patronage coming from ancient times and served to also legitimize their rule. Though the structures of much of this period have been destroyed in central India, there is a wealth of sculptures which brings alive a period of flourishing temple art.
One of the things that most excites me about Indian sculpture is the sculpture that was made as part of the symbolically rich and incredibly powerful Indian temple form. And it makes so much sense, each piece as making its own statement as part of the building, yet working together to create an entire vision of the cosmos.
The central buttresses of the walls of the temple hold the images which are closest to the temple's main deity. These represent an aspect of the deity in the sanctum. They make the deity who is deep inside visible on the outside. It is through these that the formless eternal is given a personality and made more approachable for the devotee. A mythical family is created, much like a human one, yet always transcending the mundane realities of the everyday world. These images are placed in line with the Garbha Griha, or the Sanctum Sanctorum. They serve as windows for the deity to be manifest in the world outside. The image on the back wall of the temple is the one most closely related to the deity in the inner shrine. As most temples face east, the rear wall is normally the one facing west. In Shiva temples, it is his son Ganesha who appears on the south wall. Shiva's wife Parvati, in her many forms, normally appears on the north wall.
Well, as the temple developed from, say, the late 7th, early 8th century, and I'm talking primarily about North India, there was a lot of experimentation by the priest builders to figure out what was the appropriate sculpture to go on each section of the temple. And for example, the temple walls began having sculpture on the outside only by a central niche on each of the cardinal directions. And then it slowly expanded. And you can really see that development of the logic of having a figure that relates to its place within the entire layout of the temple and relates to its place in relation to the sanctum, even though it's on the outer walls. So what you begin to see is that the temple becomes a three-dimensional sculpture through the solid walls, so that the architect is thinking about the whole and making meaning out of the entire building, whether you can see it at the same time or not. And that's very exciting.
These images are for personal devotion and are known as Ishtadevatas. They relate to the world as known to the worshipper through images of the family life of the deity. Yet, they take the devotee to another plane of reality, where the separated forms of the world begin to come together in the divine. The worshipper is provided a glimpse of the reality beyond the mundane world. He is slowly prepared for the great crossing, deep inside the temple, from the world of illusion to the knowledge of the oneness of it all. Dikpalas, or the 8 protectors of the directions, are made around the temple. They provide the sense of harmony and order in the temple, keeping away the confusion and chaos of the outside world. These are taken from the stream of Vedic beliefs. The temple walls abound in images of the abundance and fruitfulness of nature. This is the world of forms, the manifestation in numberless parts of the eternal truth of the Garbhagriha. Nagas, divine serpent kings, embody the protective forces and harmony of the world. Leogryphs rear upon the walls, awakening the courage within us to face the inner truth. Continuing the tradition of Yakshis of ancient times are celestial Apsaras and languorous Kanyas, beautiful women. Beauty is a very essential element in these depictions. In Indic philosophy, it is believed that the moment of the aesthetic response is akin to Brahmananda, or the final bliss of salvation itself. Our appreciation of beauty is a glimpse of the grace which underlies the world, the essence of divinity which is in all. This experience transports us away from the confusion of the material world to the peace which is within us. It is not the photographic reality of the world which the artist attempts to present, but the essential reality within. The final truth is to be met in the Garbhagriha, and its manifestation, its ornament, is the temple around it. Plants, insects, animals, men and women, creatures which combine these, and divinities are all manifestations of the same reality. That reality which is within the temple and within each of us. The doorway of the shrine is given special importance. For it is here that we leave behind the noise and confusion of the world to enter the peace of the cosmic order. The two great rivers which water North India, Ganga and Yamuna, bless us with their treasure of fertility. Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, has been present from early times in shrines of all religions. In a Shiva temple, the first deity on the south is Ganesha, the son of Parvati and Shiva. He is also known as the leader of the army of Shiva's Ganas, Ganapati. The placement of these images of divinities in the overall context of the temple is significant. For each of them is a fragment of a divine cosmology. Through these manifestations, the temple unfolds before the devotee the multiplying glory of the eternal. The icons presented in the temple were developed in the religious texts called the Puranas, literally meaning ancient. The Agamas are texts which contain the essential attributes of the deities for their representation in the sacred art of the temple. The main deities of the Hindu faith are Shiva, Vishnu, and Shakti. Around them are woven myths and stories about their glory and power. Shiva is given many iconographic forms as the destroyer of the demons who personify ignorance or forgetfulness of the truth. The Nataraja, Shiva in his cosmic dance, is one of his most popular representations. With all the dynamic movement of the many arms around him, there is a peace upon his face. The stillness at the center of the cosmos. The aniconic representation of Shiva in the form of the linga is among the earliest images of Indian art. This is a powerful symbol of creation, of the essence which pervades the world. From time to time, when the divine harmony of the universe begins to disintegrate, an avatara or incarnation of Vishnu is believed to appear to restore order. Thus, forms of Vishnu in his various avatars or incarnations are among the major iconic representations. 10 of them were standardized in art by the 7th or 8th centuries. As Varaha the boar, he rescues Bhudevi, the earth goddess, from the ocean of ignorance. He represents the great power and regal authority of knowledge. The worship of the female principle, Shakti, or the goddess, has been a continuous stream in Indic religious thought. For those who worship Shiva, the goddess is seen as Parvati or Uma and as Durga. Parvati is the spouse of Shiva. As Durga, she embodies the power which results in the victory always of good over evil, of knowledge over confusion. Mahishasura is one of the most magnificent representations of Durga. In all her grace and measureless strength, she effortlessly vanquishes the Mahisha or buffalo, who represents the evil of ignorance. Chamunda is another form of the goddess. Her name is the combination of the names of the demons she attacks and kills, Chanda and Munda. Just as Bhairava is a wrathful form of Shiva, Chamunda is the most horrific aspect of the goddess. Across central India, the form of the temple with its carvings developed to its height from the 5th to the 12th centuries. Here the divine was sought in the consciousness of the eternal within oneself. The art of sculpture flourished. It provided images which are reflections of the sublime qualities in us. They evoke the finest within us to take us on the path towards knowledge. When we look upon these, we are transformed for a moment. In the act of seeing, there is a transfer of grace which awakens the divinity in each of us.